OpTic have started Stage 5 2-0, and with that has come a quite expected sweep of Paris, but then a really convincing victory against the New York Subliners. The sender tweeted out last night about how they've made several small fixes in order to improve, but what are those changes, and do they mean that the Greenwall have something to look forward to in Stage 5? This is Reverse Sweep Round 11, presented by USAA Insurance. First things first, hard point setups. Let's talk about those and why they look so much better. Let's talk about the Sunday Moscow hardpoint between OpTic and New York Subliners and compare it to the last time that these two teams played against each other on that map, which would have been Stage 3, Week 3. Now, in that Stage 3, Week 3 matchup, New York Subliners came out on top in the hardpoint, whereas on Sunday, it was OpTic. So what are the changes that are resulting in them coming out on top in games that they would previously have gone on to lose? Well, the first example that I'm going to show you here, we're going to be at P3, that library setup. We're around the same amount of time, all four players are up, and OpTic are in control of the hill. The difference in how wide they've set up for this is actually incredible. In Stage 3, Week 3, Envoy here is already on the rotation, but he's on his own. He's looking for P4, but has no support in the instance he goes on to lose the gunfight. And instead, a lot of the old players are just still nestled around the hill, making sure they pick up that time. Switch to this weekend. What happened here is it's more of a 2-2 setup. You've got both ARs still in the hill soaking up time, but the SMGs of Scump and Envoy push out towards the mid-map, giving them some much-needed presence and control towards that next hill. In that weaker setup, Envoy did go on to lose that gunfight, and it meant that New York could get dug in for P4 really well, and OpTic had to try and find a way to claw them out. Meanwhile, this weekend, what happened was, even though it wasn't a great hill for OpTic, it wasn't fantastic, it was still not good for New York because of the amount of map presence that they gained, the amount of kills, and it turned it into a much more scrappy hill. A case of, if you're not going to win, don't lose. Let's quickly hop on over to another scenario. This is going to be second rotation, and it's going to be for P2. Just as it's popped, OpTic again in control, all four players alive. So we're looking for some really good defensive setups here. Let's look at the losing example first, and Envoy here. Look at that positioning. He's so far away from the rest of his team. I get it. He's the flank man. He goes on these routes and such. But in this scenario, he gets caught early, which can happen. It's a massive risk. He gets cut down, and then New York just effectively punched through the front because they have an overwhelming number advantage nice and early in the hill. The result here for OpTic is that they only managed to achieve 16 seconds in P2, a hill that a lot of people would consider to be a really good one for time if you get in first. Flipping over to this weekend's example, they're much narrower, they're much tighter to see off this first wave of New York Subliners pressure. At any given moment, a gunfight can go down and a player can be there for the trade. It's fantastic. It executes very, very well, and then they transition seamlessly into an advanced defensive setup for Wave 2. The result here, they take 55 seconds of P2, just to show you the kind of things that can result from massive differences in gameplay at this level. And these fine tunes, these fine changes that OpTic are making are very, very exciting to see and do look indeed very good for the Greenwall. Let's change over to the second point on my agenda then, and the hardpoint roles that OpTic have and how they have changed slightly. A lot of teams, what they do is they set up most of the hills with their AR in the hill and allow the SMGs to push out and cover map, cover the ground, and just ensure that the opposing team are pushed back. From Stage 1 to 4, Envoy has been the hill time player for OpTic, leading out over his teammates by a considerable margin. But at the start of Stage 5, it's actually Formal who's hunkering down in the hill quite a lot. Definitely the most out of the OpTic players. Envoy is in second, so it isn't a gigantic shift in the team, but it is a fine one that seems to be benefiting a lot of players on the map. Is this slight balance change allowing them to work together much better? Fix those issues that we've been talking about, no longer relying on individual brilliance and individual moments. Instead, they're set up as a team. They push out. They're very, very solid defensively. Taking down a full-strength New York Subliners in a hard point is a very good way of making your case that you have actually figured out some of your issues. The final thing that I want to touch on in this video is going to be OpTic search and destroy performances, and let's make a quick note about the fact that they won both games on round 11s this weekend. But that isn't actually the thing that I want to highlight here. What I want to talk about is that, again, another role shift that seems to have appeared here in their search and destroy, and particularly the first blood department. OpTic have been quite average really over the year when it comes to first bloods. Through stage 1 to 4, they took 52.7% of all available first bloods. You look at the start of stage 5 and they're up to an incredible 68.2%. Is a quite ridiculous statistic, and yes, it's a small sample size, but still, that's a huge shift. That's a huge change in the way they're opening up these rounds. And of all people for it to benefit, it's actually Dashy, who has more than doubled his first blood percentage. Watch Dashy next time on the map and the positions his teammates are taking up just to open up things and allow him to use that gun skill that he does possess to open up a kill and get themselves in for a good S&D round. My verdict, well, OpTic still need to do this consistently, right? This is a Paris, after all, who are awful, and then a New York Subliners who are out of sync after what happened at Major 4. However, I will say that it is much, much more impressive the way that they've come out of this stage than they have for the last couple. They are much more about teamwork and setups and strategy than they are about individual play all of a sudden. So whatever it is they are working on looks to be effective. I don't think that they're going to go and challenge an Atlanta FaZe, but I do think that what OpTic have shown is that they can come out, take on the New Yorks, maybe the Dallases, maybe the Torontos, and make things more interesting. Maybe we see them in a grand final when it comes to Major 5.